So I think it's important to always keep your door open and have a conversation with them and like discuss with them, hey, like, okay, like if something really needs to happen, let's discuss options. Like never come out from a conversation without like both parties being clear, okay, what will be the next step? Because I think that's what leads to a lot of things, including shadow IT, because people are like, well, this person isn't interested to help me, so I'm gonna help myself.
Hi, and welcome to the Ordinary Marketing Ops podcast. And hi, Sergiy. Thanks for joining.
Hey, Morten. Great. Thanks for having me. Really happy to be here.
Yeah, we actually met in 2023, right? Wasn't it the MOps
something like that.
in
2023 or 2020. Yeah, that was the first MOPS.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we pretty much hung out the entire event. We met the first morning or the first day or something, and
I mean, we even like met the day before because it was
exactly.
having a beer in the lobby. That was still probably one of my favorite moments. It was a great chat on the table.
Yeah, I agree. So for those of you that don't know Sergiy, he's a senior manager of marketing operations at Compass Digital in Vancouver, and he has over 10 years in marketing operations. Sergiy, you were the first MOPS hire at Apryse, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and there you built the entire function from the ground up, and you also worked at Kaseya, where you ran the MOPS across multiple business units.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
No, that's basically like my core background. Those were the experiences where I think I got to learn like the meat of the craft. But I did start in marketing ops technically a little bit earlier in my position at a small agency as well. I was technically a digital marketing specialist there, but basically there was an under-maintained CRM instance there that I basically was able to take over because nobody wanted to. And that's technically how I got my start. And that's what excited me about the world of marketing ops, and that was actually the role where I learned about the term marketing operations, because I started doing it and I was like, I wonder if does this job exist? Like, is this a thing? And I started doing research and like, oh yeah, marketing operations. And I was like, this is cool. This is exactly what I want to do. And so then it just started developing, and then I started on that journey that you've just described. Yeah.
Cool. I think many of us have kind of similar, really various ways of ending up in marketing ops. So it's always funny to, or not funny, but always interesting to hear what others hear of all the other ways into marketing ops.
Yeah.
Sergiy, today we are talking about something I think a lot of people recognize, that temptation to solve every problem with a new tool. And I think you have a thing or two to say about that. Don't we all like? But I would start it all with asking you, what is tool-oriented problem solving to you, and why is it so common?
Yeah, that was a very good question. So I think, like you mentioned, you all probably at some point in our marketing operations career face this. And I think to me, it comes, I tend to be an optimist. So to me, it comes from a good place. You work with different teams, sales team, marketing team, product team, and we're all trying to solve our problems as we go, day to day. And as a human being, we all tend to naturally jump to whatever our brain thinks is the easiest solution, right? And so we're facing a problem like all marketers do. There's not enough leads, or we need to add more leads to the pipeline to meet the targets. And the tendency is, and it's not helped, of course, sometimes by the sales messages you get on LinkedIn that overpromise you saying, hey, why don't you buy our ABM tool and you'll just get a ton of new leads just like that, right? And it's just so easy. And I think the 2010s also was the time when SaaS exploded. There was a lot of promise about it. It was exciting. All that to say, yeah, it comes from a good place. But then I think as we got closer to like the COVID times, during COVID times, but especially afterwards, we all started to realize, and I mean, the people who were really great strategic leaders, they started to realize it long before that, is that, of course, the tool will not really solve anything for you because it often has to be a part of your strategy. And yeah, I think tool-oriented problem solving is really just that. It's the easiest thing that people jump onto, and they just don't necessarily want to face the difficult questions. And then you have to dig into reasons why you may not necessarily want to dig into difficult questions, because difficult questions involve asking about strategy and asking about do you have a program that a tool would support? Do you actually have have you done an analysis, and like have you potentially just maybe hit some plateau, like whatever problem solving, like sticking to lead generation? Is there just an organic plateau that you hit and you have to look for something different, maybe not generating leads, but improving your conversion rate? And those are more difficult questions, but that's why you have marketing ops to solve. And I think that's why we're greatly positioned to do that. So, yeah.
Yep. In my experience, it's like, as you mentioned, that it's difficult to go in and ask actually the difficult questions, because you know that like the management or even the CEO, they want to buy their way out of a problem. Like that's the easy fix. And we need, we have this platform. You didn't manage to do to solve the problems with it, so we buy another one. And trying to tell the management that, okay, so it won't matter because the data isn't there. We need to fix other boring stuff, etc. It's difficult to go in and say that. And actually, I think many don't do it because they know that they risk being kind of sidetracked, like just put aside, because we don't want to hear what you're saying, so you're not even in the discussion because we need to buy this tool. And even as a kind of external consultant, I think that that's even harder to go in and it's much easier to just sell a new tool and move on. And then the company is stuck with a new tool, and months later they buy another one because it fell apart. And but you built tech stacks from scratch, and I wonder, what's your framework for evaluating whether you actually need a new tool?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think it all comes down to having a foundational MarTech strategy. So really knowing your lay of the land and kind of aligning with the direction that the organization is going in a given financial year. So I think it starts from having that sort of roadmap that you got to make sure that it aligns with the business and with the business themes. So I think that alignment is significant, because then what it helps you do is that you then look at your overall life cycle, right? So you will have your kind of side of things where you generate awareness, you capture leads, you convert leads, and then you have like nurturing parts, and then you have everything down to conversion and closed won. So each tool, typically I try to map it to kind of where does it fall on that kind of customer journey. And then along the way, you will have some foundational tools. So your core platforms, and then your like analytics platforms, they don't necessarily fall into any customer journey tool, right? So like Marketo or HubSpot or Salesforce, they're just your core tools. They're basically feed your entire journey. They feed like they're the core systems that you typically don't replace really. And you typically actually evolve them over time, because whichever tool you go with, it's typically capable of evolving with your business. So on those core systems are kind of, they sit on the core, and then analytics platforms like, like a BI, like a Tableau or something like that, that just helps with the disbursements of, So that's kind of the framework that I follow. And so then, each year, or sometimes, if you're maybe in a faster environment, maybe it's every quarter, you kind of look at the theme, and like you talk with the business stakeholders, asking like, hey, like what are we doing? What are the plans? And then you kind of take it back. You kind of do the analysis, and you map your tech stack to that, and you look at like the holes. So, if we're going to be ramping up our webinar program, for example, then you start looking at, okay, can our webinar tools support what the marketing team is planning to do with the webinar program? And so then kind of you use that approach, and then you kind of go into frameworks of evaluating tools against each other, stuff like that. But taking a step back, that's kind of like the framework that I try to follow, because that allows you to also to be focused, because sometimes one tool can kind of solve multiple problems. And that's been the trend that we can discuss, that I've been seeing, especially in the environment where budgets are tight.
This is maybe for someone that would see the next question I have as a tooth question, but what role does think integration versus standalone functionality play in your evaluation of tools?
Do you mean an integration into like a core system, like on the tool level, or
whether like does when you evaluate it, do you look at, is this integratable, or is it a standalone functionality?
Yeah, I guess the boring answer is it depends. Typically you would think that you would want to integrate. Now, it's depending on what you're trying to solve. You may get away with having a standalone, but I think I am not necessarily on the side of where like a tool has to have a perfect integration. I think integration is more of a plan than a technical capability, because you can integrate in so many different ways. I'm not of a school of, I know a lot of my MOps colleagues believe that, if a tool says we connect through Zapier, it's not a real integration, so it's an automatic no. I am not of that belief. I think if that might be enough, then that actually might be perfect. The most important thing is to discuss the actual, like, what's the plan for the tool to do. So approaching integration as a plan rather than only like technical capability is the most important thing there. So sometimes, like hopefully there is some sort of ability to integrate. And I think, especially these days, like if a tool doesn't have any sort of integration capability, it's unlikely to survive on the market at all, especially with AI being so prevalent. Like every tool has to be able to have some level of KPI integration, and then you can find a way to connect it to your tech stack, right? So, and I think we will actually see that more these days. And I think as marketing operations professionals, we'll have to get more comfortable with the fact that some tools will either create like, like like their full integration with like Salesforce under an enterprise plan, for example, right? And then, but they may have a middle plan that has a way to integrate through an AI agent or like a Zapier or N8N. And that might be enough. And we have to, like, because of AI developments, we have to get comfortable with the fact that the business will push us to get the most out of that. Then I think it will just, on our end, we just have to then be able to have that conversation. Okay, so what's like the plan for integration? Be able to explain the trade-offs. And usually the business, they'll be like, well, I'm okay with the trade-offs. So, build it for me. So yeah, basically to summarize, my answer is I don't think a tool has to have a perfect integration. It all comes down to like, yeah, what's your plan of, like how does it fall into your full marketing tech stack roadmap and plan?
Yeah, when I said trick question, it was more like previously I've been kind of, on the side of if your tool is not integratable, you're going to be out of business in a few years because you need to be integratable. But as you mentioned, the integration is in my head. That is like, it doesn't have to be a kind of a full integration. For me, is the important part is that you're actually able to have data flowing from A to B in an automatic way or a regular way, not a manual kind of download something and then upload or copy paste manually. It's as long as you can have use Zapier or Make or other similar tools, that is for me integration enough. But that means that you need to have, in these days, you need to have an an API, or you need to have an MCP, or you need to be able to connect the dots. So yeah.
For sure. I actually have a story about that, like very quickly. Yeah. Basically, like the way that this dawned on me, because I kind of used to be like you as well. And then one day I remember we were using some proprietary database where like it didn't even have like a direct way of exporting the data, which to your point, like as long as there is a way to get the data out, that you can integrate it. But like that tool didn't even have that. And then I remember I was vehemently against using it, and then finally like I talked to like a CFO, and CFO got frustrated with me, and he's like, hey, like the data in the tool is so valuable, like we'll get you like a contractor who will literally like just all he will do or she will do is just sit there and manually get the records out, populated in a spreadsheet for you, and that will be your integration. Like, so like it just like, and kind of like changed my mindset a bit, because it's like, it's all about like what's the value for the business. If the tool is valuable enough, like you find a way to integrate it. And so that kind of like moved me out of the frame of always thinking about integration from a technical perspective. So yeah. Just like very quickly, like a funny story, because I remember I was like, oh yeah, I mean there's always a way.
There's always a way. I'm I couldn't agree more. Or almost always a way.
Almost, yeah. Almost, yeah.
How do you keep budget disciplined when pressure comes from like all directions? You talked about budget for my last question, but how do you keep it? How do you keep control?
So again, going back to sort of your plan, you want to make sure that whatever you have going on your roadmap, you map it to the budget and keeping it in control. I mean, there's several ways you kind of try to approach it. So firstly, I think whenever you look at like, okay, you have like a problem, you know that this is on the roadmap, you need to kind of solve it, you know that technology can help you. You start then looking at you start building your kind of product, like what I call like a product sheet, or like, what are your must-to-have requirements, and you kind of start having like a real conversation, get like, so what does it actually have to do versus what you can live without. And very quickly you start realizing that, for example, like the tool that we have is actually capable of doing it, or perhaps like if we buy like an add-on from them, like it'll be significantly cheaper than like going to a standalone solution. And so you kind of do that evaluation. And I think to the point where everybody's talking about SaaSpocalypse because of AI, to me, it actually started way earlier, after we had that interest rate thing going on after COVID, where governments raised everything and suddenly there was no free money anymore. Budgets got tighter. And I remember like you start having difficult conversations like, oh, like I have a tool that already has a built-in calendar booking capability. Like, do I still need a standalone tool that's doing it for me? Yeah, it may not be as developed, but it'll do the job. It'll still do some must-have things like integrating booked meetings into Salesforce, but like it may not have full capabilities, but I don't have to pay anything extra for it. And suddenly you're finding yourself in a situation where like very quickly you start axing tools that are very, 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 very specialized, and that specialized need isn't very easy to tie to the revenue problem you're trying to solve, right? So, and that's what helps you keep your budget tighter, because as soon as you're able to say that, hey, this tool can definitely be tied to revenue, or this tool solves multiple problems at the same time, you can start justifying the spend. So that's kind of like a more on the strategic level, and then you can apply some kind of, as you do more of that, you can start to sort of be a little bit more with like a little bit more foresight, planning to use some tricks and always like make sure to leave some wiggle room in the budget. Never go into like a budget season and like never don't have like some wiggle room or like some pockets of budget that like, because you're always gonna face a situation where either a stakeholder is gonna come with a tool and like, you know, because there's a problem you're trying to solve and it actually is a legit problem, like you will always face that situation, and you never really want to be in a situation where people start scrutinizing your budget again, and then they start questioning tools that you perhaps don't really want to have too much spotlight and under scrutiny under. So it helps to make sure that you leave some kind of pockets, and like you can easily kind of, there's like tricks in the spreadsheet you can always do to make sure that you actually have the money. You know, like you can play around with billing dates and stuff like that. But like I always really, like in my experience, found that to be helpful, because the last thing you want to say is like everybody aligned, oh yeah, we're gonna need to buy this tool, and then you're the grumpy person in the room saying we don't have the money for it, and then people start questioning, well, why don't we get rid of this tool? And then you have to go through the whole exercise of re-explaining your like tech stack. So yeah, so I would say that, and then always be ready for a situation where perhaps you will face a choice where you might have to like say, okay, maybe we will not renew with some tool, and you have to know like which one you are ready to live without. I think it's just the reality. Like budgets can get slashed for absolutely different reasons. I mean, it's a business, right? The financial team, you know, they move budget, and so like sometimes you have to be ready for that, and like you have to either like downgrade, maybe reduce database, or like reduce number of users, whatever it may be. It helps to be prepared in advance rather than like face that situation and you're becoming incredibly frustrated. You feel like the world is against you. Like I've been in that situation. The reason why I'm talking about this way is because like, and then you kind of, once things cool down, you realize, oh yeah, like I should just really kind of try to prepare for something like this in advance as much as possible, because then it becomes infinitely easier. So that's kind of like some of the more like tricks are like, oh, it's a strategy. And I mean, I think everybody who manages budget, after like the first couple of times, that's what I found a lot of people do, because I asked for advice, and that's, a lot of people recommended this for me. So yeah.
Yeah. I would think that it could help to, if you look at your tech stack and, okay, so this is like if you're spending the whole budget and you don't actually have room for new tools, and then you at least in order to prepare, as you said, kind of arrange or kind of divide your tech stack in two, like need to have and a smaller nice to have. And these nice to have are, one of these or two of these are the first to go if you are pressured. So then you don't have to go through the stack entirely and do a kind of a full review. Have you ever cut a tool that the team loved? You probably have, but do you have an example?
I do. Actually, yeah, I do. Yeah. I don't know why I even thought for so long about it. Yeah. So I can give an example. Yeah, I cut Gong out of our tech stack, and I was not a very popular person at the time. So the story is like, and again, so Gong is an amazing tool. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Like I love it. It gives you amazing insights. So the thing is that like I remember like I started going down the like like what was our usage and like what was the use cases and then like how much money we were paying. And what was happening at the time is we were going through a merger and we wanted to be able to scale the sales team and like our needs shifted. So at the time, Gong was primarily used for us to get insights out of conversations. And I mean, that's like its bread and butter. Then we suddenly started growing as an organization. We went through a merger, and suddenly the purpose of a tool recorder would become more so on a coaching perspective. So for especially to scale the sales team, it was no longer a small company where like, like a very, very good salespeople would kind of like, they would be the ones who bring all the money in and like, like they're superstars, you don't need to coach them. But suddenly as you scale organization, you need to be able to bring like everybody up to a certain level, and call recording helps you do that. And so suddenly like the call recording becomes a coaching tool, and you need to have a seat for every team member, not only for some select few. And so then we were facing a budgetary scrutiny and stuff like so. Yeah, I had to cut it, yeah, it wasn't popular, but like we cut it because we were using Outreach at the time. So Outreach, if somebody doesn't know, it's like a sales sequencing tool that allows you, like you typically use it for like outbound sequences, but then they also had a pretty capable call recording solution as well. It was not really up to par with Gong's capabilities, like for sure, but it had enough with like transcription, some highlights, like automate, and then they actually, and we saw a sign that they were actually interested in developing it more as well. And so we were like, well, listen, we knew we still needed outreach because we still had to support outbound motion, and everybody would have a seat with that. We knew that we wanted to do more outbound anyway, so everybody would have to have a seat. So then we just had a conversation with us. So like we kind of combined the two tools. And yeah, I don't know, I'm kind of putting Gong on the blast, but to be fair, though, they recognized the issue. They actually went ahead and they built their own sales sequencing solution because they saw the trend on the market. People started optimizing their budgets and collapsing them into like one platform, right? Because it also meant you only have one less big platform to maintain. That's a big cost as well.
Yeah.
So they recognize it too. They now they basically compete with Outreach now on like almost up to par. And I think they already caught up with some of the functionality on sequencing. So like I think the market recognized it. But yeah, it was a lot of difficult conversations. I had to like manage a lot of tempers, and it was yeah. But I think that goes back to kind of what's your business case, like what's the business case for to like how does it serve the strategy, and what is the more important. And you will never be able to satisfy everyone.
No.
Yeah.
If you try, you will satisfy no one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What about team discipline? How do you prevent people from acquiring so-called shadow IT and tools on their own?
So first of all, I think, I don't know if you necessarily can. So one important thing is a lot of it comes from the organization itself, and I think like financial department discipline. So as a MOps person, there's only so much you can do, but you cannot really control what somebody does with their credit card, either personal credit card or corporate credit card. And I've seen both like cases for different reasons. So, a person will just, often it happens as because the person maybe feels frustrated that something isn't being solved, and so they're trying to jump hoops. So again, being an optimist, I always try to assume the best intent. So if people end up buying shadow IT, it's probably because maybe they don't feel heard enough, or things take too long, or they don't have clarity on when you can necessarily maybe get to solving their problem. They don't have time to wait, so that they jump into a solution. So I think it's important to always keep your door open and have a conversation with them and like discuss with them, hey, like, okay, like if something really needs to happen, let's discuss options. Like never come out from a conversation without like both parties being clear, okay, what will be the next step? Because I think that's what leads to a lot of things, including shadow IT, because people are like, well, this person isn't interested to help me, so I'm going to help myself. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, again, financial department discipline. I think controlling, again, people will not really buy, $50,000 worth of a subscription on a personal credit card. So then it's like, maybe a corporate credit card. So that's when you want to partner with a financial team because they will kind of have control of that. And typically, like, if budgets are tightly managed, then they can flag things for you and they will actually do the job for you. They will scrutinize a decision maker spending that much money, and they will be the ones questioning, why is money being spent. And then the third thing I would say is that I think if somebody does want to try a tool, I mean, there's always options to do like a pilot or a POC. I try to be flexible when it comes to like trying new things, but you just have to be upfront about expectations and like compliance in particular, because that's a big thing, and you have to make it clear for the person, like, hey, if you're gonna buy like an AI tool and you're gonna start uploading a database of your customers or call recordings with proprietary information on it, like you're going to be the one who's in trouble. So let me help you to make sure you don't like mess your job up, because you'll be like, it's there's serious ramifications for this kind of stuff, right? So and I don't think people often realize it, and it depends on the company. But even smaller companies, you will get into trouble if you start putting private conversations you shouldn't be into ChatGPT. I think that's kind of how I would address it. It's I don't think anyone has a solution for it, but I think there's ways you can do to kind of again minimize the chance like of impact really, and like handle relationships.
I have one last question for you for this episode. What's your advice for someone who inherits an overgrown tech stack? Like, where do you start? What's step one? How do you prioritize what goes versus what stays, and what's the most common mistakes people make in that situation?
So what I would say is it's a usual problem that we all face. So when you started in your role, you typically will probably want to start with like your typical 30, 60, 90 days, right? Kind of plan. Smaller companies, you sometimes want to collapse the timeline because you don't like, startups typically don't like waiting for 90 days for some impact, but the principle still applies. So the first 30 days or however many days you dedicate that to yourself, you want to basically get the lay of the land. And I would say restrain yourself from jumping into a solution right away. Like what I've done and like as a mistake, like when we were doing one of the kind of merger and acquisitions that I managed at one of the companies I worked at. The company that was coming in, like one of the senior stakeholders there said like, oh, we hate like, so they had a ZoomInfo subscription and they said like, oh, we all hate ZoomInfo here. So it's like definitely put it as a tool in the chopping block. And, and their tech stack kind of was a little overblown. So I was like, oh, perfect. Because ZoomInfo costs a ton of money. So, because usually it's hard to take it away from the sales team. And this was a case where a sales leader was telling me, please get rid of it. So I was like so happy about it. And then we did it. And then like over time, we regretted it because actually it wasn't necessarily like the person wasn't necessarily talking for everybody. And so again, like take the lay of the land, spend time interviewing senior stakeholders, but also like stakeholders on the ground, because they will tell you the real story. And you as like a RevOps person, as a marketing ops person, especially if like me, you're like, so like there is a reason why organizations put RevOps into like a neutral lay, like under finance or operations team, not on specifically marketing or sales. You have to serve the business rather than interest of one particular department. So get the lay of the land. So for sure do that audit, interview people. So start with that. And then I would say step 2 is you can then start building like your MarTech strategy, right? So again, going back to the framework that I've described, okay, so you have this tech stack. How does it map from the audit you've done to the customer journey? What are the plans of the business? And then it very quickly becomes like obvious, like what are the things that you can cut. And then you start turning it into business cases. So you build a business case to either cut the tool or reduce waste, stuff like that. Then you can do things like, okay, maybe sometimes the tool is there, but like, you're contracted and you cannot get rid of it immediately. There's always ways, and this is where it's important to find, like, partner with your financial department. Like, there's always ways you can kind of minimize the impact of a tool, like on the budget. There's like financial tricks you can, it's not a trick, it's a strategy where it's like, it becomes like a tool that goes like below the fold of like, it's not a tool that is kind of counted as like a capital expense. And like there's like tricks you can apply, like if you have to deal with those situations. And then finally, again, make sure that you communicate to stakeholders on, okay, like we have this tool, we want to cut it potentially. How do you feel about it? Before you start presenting formal strategy, I definitely recommend talking to a person who may be impacted so that you don't get blindsided in like a bigger meeting by a person blowing up saying, well, I don't want to have this tool canceled. So like always try to have those conversations in advance. Yep. And then, other than that, make sure that your plan is airtight. You've assigned metrics. Again, you've mapped the tech stack to metrics, to revenue. And then, it becomes very easy afterwards to kind of start getting rid of things, and always have like a very quick sort of set of pitch points or story points to explain like, your tech stack budget and why, like what's your theme, where are you moving it, what are the motions, what are the themes that you're supporting, because it helps you talk to executives and like it helps you get a buy-in as well that way, because executives don't typically want to get into the details, but they want to make sure that you understand what the business is doing. And, then they will feel comfortable and they will trust you to take care of like the small details in your tech stack. They don't necessarily even care about names of tools or stuff like that. They just care that you kind of are aligned with the direction of the business. So that's kind of my advice with it. Yeah.
So to wrap up this episode, if you had to give our audience one sentence to think about next time they're evaluating a new tool, what would that be?
Always go with where the business is going. Follow the themes, listen to what the stakeholders, so the executives, are talking about, and make sure that you can align to that. You may not agree with it, but other than just very simply job security, it positions you well as a strategic partner, and you always want to be seen as a strategic partner rather than as a cost center and as someone who is there just to kind of push buttons, or someone who's always just like a negative person who's always trying to slow things down. You never want to be seen as a person who slows things down. You want to be a person who supports the vision. And then as long as you can maintain the direction, you will always find a way to kind of still do things in your own, like, as you like, but yeah, that would be my advice.
Thank you, Sergiy. This was just pure gold. We're going to take a short break, and when we're back with episode 13, we're going to talk about something that you have uniquely deep experience with, namely acquisitions, and what that means for the person sitting in the MOps chair.
Awesome.
So, thank you for this episode. See you in the next one.